In a freezing RV with no heat, sleep becomes a calculation. Airflow versus warmth, moisture versus mold, silence versus alarms, and mistakes you don't feel. Tonight, the RV is not a refuge. It is a thin shell that slows wind and amplifies cold, parked where it can avoid attention for a few hours. There is no heater, no shore power. The battery is finite. Propane is either gone, rationed, or avoided. Inside, the air is still enough to trap breath, but not warm enough to forgive wet fabric or bad timing. An RV looks like a room, but it behaves like a container. The walls are light, the windows are large, the seams move. In freezing temperatures, every surface becomes a heat exchanger. Metal frames pull warmth out of fingertips. The door threshold leaks. The roof sheds heat upward. The floor does something worse. It is suspended over open air, so cold comes from below, not only from the sides. Outside, a person can pace and stay alert to sound. Inside, the goal is to stop moving without losing core temperature. That means committing to sleep while the environment keeps stealing heat. The problem is not a single moment of cold. It is the slow drain across 6 to 8 hours, with fewer chances to correct mistakes once the body settles. The first minutes inside are usually not spent lying down. They are spent listening. The RV makes noise when it cools. Plastic snaps. Wind pushes at vents and trim. In a lot, footsteps and voices outside become part of the calculation. Shoes stay on longer than they should, because leaving quickly matters more than comfort. Keys stay close. A phone stays where it can be reached without sitting up. The interior temperature follows the outside, just delayed. At dusk, the RV can feel manageable because the walls still hold a trace of daytime warmth. By midnight, glass can frost from the inside. By 3 a.m., the floor can feel like a cold plate. At that point, the difference between sleeping and waking is not attitude. It is insulation, airflow, moisture, and whether the body can keep producing heat without burning through calories it cannot replace easily. Without a heater, the body becomes the only heat source. A resting adult produces roughly the heat of a light bulb. That number does not sound like survival, but it is the central constraint. The night becomes a question of where that small amount of heat goes. If it leaks into walls and windows, the RV stays cold and the person cools down. If it stays near the body, sleep is possible. There is an additional rule in a freezing RV. Attempts to add heat can add risk. Combustion adds carbon monoxide. It also adds moisture. Moisture turns into condensation, and condensation turns into wet bedding, wet clothing, and ice on surfaces that have no insulation behind them. A person can wake up with water on the walls and think the leak is outside. Often it is inside. This is the pressure that shapes the night. Every choice has two outcomes, and both can be bad. Seal the space too tight, and the air becomes damp, stale, and unsafe. Leave it too open, and drafts cut through layers and pull heat away faster than the body can replace it. Choose a hidden spot, and you may get knocked, towed, or forced to move at the coldest hour. There is no margin for sickness, wet socks, or a mistake at 2 a.m. In this RV, sleep is not a reset. It is a controlled shutdown with risks on both sides of the door. What matters is whether the person wakes up with enough function to solve the next problem. Before sleeping, the interior gets reduced in size. Not renovated, not improved, just made smaller. Blankets, tarps, spare fabric, anything flexible gets hung to divide the RV. One corner becomes the sleeping zone. The rest is abandoned volume that will not be warmed. This is not efficiency, it is damage control. Windows are treated as openings, not light sources. Glass radiates cold inward, so layers are added to create still air. Plastic film, cardboard, foam board, spare clothing, the material matters less than the gap it creates. Even a thin pocket of trapped air slows heat loss. Light is sacrificed if it has to be. Darkness costs less than cold. Seams get attention next. Door frames, slide joints, vent edges. These are felt by hand, not measured. If cold air can be felt, it is moving fast enough to drain heat all night. Soft items are pressed into gaps because they flex when the RV shifts. Hard items are wedged where movement is minimal. Nothing is permanent. Everything has to be removable before morning. The floor dictates the rest of the setup. RV floors are thin and suspended. Cold air flows underneath and pulls heat downward. Direct contact is avoided. Layers are stacked to separate the body from the plywood. Cardboard first, then foam, then clothing, then bedding. Compression is minimized. Once insulation is flattened, it stops working. Bedding is arranged to trap heat, not display order. Sleeping bags, blankets, coats are layered so loft stays intact. Zippers and seams are kept off the body where possible. A hat stays on because exposed skin loses heat faster than covered skin. Gloves are kept nearby, not worn, so hands can be covered quickly if circulation drops. Airflow is managed in short adjustments. Complete ceiling traps moisture. Too much ventilation drops temperature. A vent might be cracked early in the night, then closed when condensation slows. Later, it may be opened again when breath fogs the air. These changes happen half awake, without standing up, because movement burns calories and breaks insulation. Water is managed alongside heat. Wet items are isolated immediately. Damp socks do not get warmed by wearing them. They get moved away from the sleeping area to keep moisture from spreading. Bottles are checked for leaks. Spills at night are not just inconvenient. They can end sleep entirely. Electronics are positioned for survival, not comfort. Phones drain faster in cold. They are kept close to the body or inside bedding to preserve battery. Flashlights are placed where they can be reached without sitting up. The battery level determines whether light can be used at all or safe for emergencies. Parking choice feeds back into all of this. Wind direction matters. Exposure under overpasses blocks snowfall but amplifies noise. Open lots allow airflow but invite attention. Engines stay off. Idling risks exhaust, buildup, and fuel loss. Heat is not borrowed from tomorrow. It is conserved tonight. Food timing affects heat production. Eating late forces the body to digest while trying to sleep. Eating nothing reduces heat output before dawn. Most choose small, dense calories shortly before lying down. Digestion creates warmth, but it also increases thirst. Water intake is limited to avoid waking. Bathroom access is uncertain. Holding waste is uncomfortable, but getting up costs heat and increases visibility outside. Clothing for morning is staged before sleep. Nothing new gets searched for in the dark. Every item is placed so it can be reached by touch alone. These routines repeat nightly, adjusting for weather, location, enforcement pressure, and fatigue. With no guarantee conditions will be the same tomorrow or improve later. Most problems do not announce themselves. They start small and compound while the body is trying to rest. Condensation is usually first. Breath settles on cold surfaces and turns into water. That water collects on metal ribs, window edges, and the inside of doors. As temperature drops, it freezes. Once insulation gets damp, it loses loft and becomes a conductor. Heat that should stay near the body bleeds into walls and disappears. Air quality is the next failure point. Sealing an RV too tightly slows heat loss, but it also traps carbon dioxide and moisture. Headaches, shallow breathing, and confusion can develop gradually. These symptoms overlap with fatigue and cold stress, so they are easy to ignore. Ventilation solves one problem while worsening another. Open too much, and the sleeping area becomes a draft channel. Open too little, and the air becomes heavy and unsafe. The balance shifts as temperature changes through the night. Attempts to add heat often create new risks. Open flames, improvised heaters, and running engines introduce combustion gases. Carbon monoxide has no smell and no warning. Early exposure causes drowsiness and poor judgment. A person may think they are simply exhausted and decide to sleep deeper. By the time symptoms are clear, response time is limited. Even low output sources can become dangerous in a sealed space. Moisture created by combustion adds another layer of failure. Burning fuel releases water vapor. That vapor condenses on walls, ceilings, and bedding. By morning, surfaces can be coated in frost. Wet fabric against skin accelerates heat loss. Frozen condensation can block vents and jam latches, trapping cold air paths that were controlled earlier in the night. External disruptions are unpredictable and costly. Security patrols, property owners, or police can force movement when body temperature is lowest. Packing quickly means insulation is disturbed and layers are compressed. Starting an engine under stress risks exhaust intrusion. Driving half awake increases accident risk. Losing a parking spot can mean hours of searching while cold deepens. Mechanical issues compound quietly. A cracked vent cover lets wind pressurize the interior. A worn door seal becomes a steady heat leak. A dead battery removes light, ventilation control, and communication. Small failures that would be inconveniences in a house become immediate threats when the margin is thin. Sleep itself becomes shallow. The body cycles between dozing and waking to adjust layers, airflow, and position. Each adjustment burns calories and reduces total rest. Poor sleep degrades decision-making the following day, making the next night harder. Illness worsens the problem. Fever increases heat loss. Dehydration thickens blood and slows circulation. Minor injuries heal slowly in cold, damp conditions. Noise contributes to strain. Wind, traffic, and movement outside keep the nervous system alert. Silence can be equally stressful, making every sound inside the RV feel amplified. The mind stays partially engaged, listening for knocks or alarm. This vigilance prevents full recovery. By morning, damage is not always visible. Bedding may feel dry after airing out. Walls may clear of frost. The cost shows up later as numbness, joint pain, lingering coughs, and reduced tolerance for cold. Repeated exposure increases risk of hypothermia, even at higher temperatures. What fails most often is not equipment. It is the ability to maintain balance across multiple risks at once, through the night, without making a single mistake. Fatigue also affects perception of time. Minutes feel longer. Corrections feel optional. A small leak ignored at midnight can become a full failure by dawn, when strength, warmth, and attention are already reduced during hours when correction options narrow and consequences escalate quickly at night. Morning does not reset the situation. It exposes what carried over from the night. Condensation has to be released before it refreezes. Bedding is shaken, hung, or laid across seats while sunlight is available. Moisture that stays becomes tomorrow's cold. Windows are uncovered briefly, even when the air outside hurts to breathe. Air exchange is not comfort. It is maintenance. Clothing choices get reassessed. Anything damp is rotated out or worn only while moving. Dry layers are reserved for stillness. Food decisions are tied to heat production, not appetite. Small, dense calories are favored because digestion generates warmth without taking space. Water intake is controlled to avoid unnecessary trips outside. Bathroom access is planned around public hours, not convenience. The RV itself requires attention. Seals are checked, tape gets replaced, temporary fixes harden overnight and fail when flexed. Tires lose pressure in cold, batteries lose capacity. Fuel gauges drop faster than expected. Every system works against its limits. There is no buffer for neglect. Location becomes the next problem. A spot that worked last night may not work again. Security patterns change. Complaints accumulate. A note on the windshield changes the plan for the day. Movement costs fuel and attention. Staying still costs safety. Neither option resolves the underlying risk. Interactions are brief and cautious. Help can bring attention. Privacy protects location but limits options. Trust is situational and expires quickly. People share information about enforcement, weather, and open lots, then separate. Clustering increases warmth but increases visibility. Isolation reduces noise but increases vulnerability. As daylight fades, the cycle tightens. Items used to dry become insulation again. Airflow is reduced. Batteries are rationed. The body carries forward what it lost the night before. If sleep was shallow, reaction time is slower. If calories were low, heat production drops earlier. If moisture lingered, insulation performs worse. Weather forecasts are checked, but they do not solve anything. Wind direction matters more than temperature numbers. Snow can insulate or immobilize. Rain creates moisture that freezes later. Each change shifts which risk becomes dominant. There is no finish line. The RV does not become safer with experience. Familiarity only shortens setup time. The same decisions repeat under different conditions. Every night tests whether small controls still hold. When they fail, There is rarely a dramatic moment, just a quiet realization that the margin is gone. By the time sleep becomes possible again, the structure is already cooling. The walls are already losing heat. The floor is already pulling warmth away. Tomorrow is present before morning, and nothing guarantees the RV will still be here. Night returns without warning. Temperatures drop faster after sunset than memory suggests. Setup begins earlier, with less energy than yesterday. Items get reused before drying fully. Shortcuts appear reasonable when hands are stiff. Vent positions are guessed instead of adjusted. The body settles sooner, not because it is ready, but because standing costs too much. Outside sounds change. Traffic thins. Footsteps carry farther. The RV cools unevenly. Corners freeze first. Breath becomes visible again. Decisions narrow to simple questions. Stay still or adjust. Open air or seal. Wait or move. None of the answers are correct for long. The space shrinks to what can be controlled by touch alone. Time stretches. Sleep arrives in fragments. The night does not resolve. It only ends. Morning will test whatever survived. If nothing failed, it will be tried again. If something did, the adjustment will be smaller than the risk that caused it, because options keep narrowing. By then, the night is already approaching. Nothing marks the boundary. Only repetition remains, unfinished. Again, when the lights go out, the RV becomes a test of small controls. Air, moisture, noise, location, fatigue. None of it is stable. The night doesn't care what you planned at dusk. It only measures what stayed dry, what stayed breathable, and what didn't move when someone knocked outside again.